This is from The Guardian. Israel perpetuating war crimes in plain sight in Gaza, says ex-UK diplomat. Mark Smith, who quit Dublin embassy role, says he raised his concerns over weapons sales with Foreign Secretary.
Israel is flagrantly and regularly committing war crimes in Gaza, according to former British diplomat who recently resigned over the minister's failure to ban arms sales to Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Mark Smith, who resigned as a counter-terrorism official at the British Embassy in Dublin after raising complaints about the sale of British weapons to Israel, told the BBC on Monday that he believed Israel to be in breach of international law. Smith told Radio 4's Today program, "When you look at what constitutes a war crime, it's actually quite clear, even from what you see in open source on the TV, that the state of Israel is perpetuating war crimes in plain sight. Anybody who has a kind of basic understanding of these things can see that there are war crimes being committed, not once, not twice, not a few times, but quite flagrantly and openly and regularly." Smith's exit became public over the weekend after a resignation email was leaked in which he accused senior members of the Israeli government of open genocidal intent. In a message that was sent to hundreds of officials and advisors, Smith said there was no justification for the UK's continued arms sales to Israel, yet somehow it continues. The resignation came as the British government carries out a review of its export licensing rules for arms to Israel. David Lammy, now the Foreign Secretary, called in opposition for a pause in sales, but since taking office has said he is looking at curbs of offensive weapons in Gaza. Lammy's review has been delayed because of the widening Middle East crisis and because of the legal difficulty in distinguishing between offensive and defensive weapons. So what would offensive be like? Shields, like police shields and a baton? Would that
All
be?
weapons are offensive.
Well, they're saying the difference between offensive and defensive.
Mm-hmm.
Guns are defensive. They can be offensive, but they're defensive, so that already cancels it out. So it's like, you can send them your freaking police shields, and that's it. That's logical. I wouldn't even give them that much. While that review goes on, lawyers have submitted claims to the High Court in London of Palestinians being tortured, left untreated in hospitals, and unable to escape constant bombardment. The lawyers are seeking a court order blocking further arms sales because of what they say is a clear risk that the weapons would be used to commit breaches in international humanitarian law. Weapons manufacturers seeking export licenses to sell to Israel say they have been told that new licenses have been suspended pending the review. Smith, who says he previously led a government assessment in the legality of arms sales to different countries, said on Monday he had raised his concerns with the Foreign Secretary and at pretty much every level of the organization. Asked what response he had been given, he replied, "I resigned because of this issue, so you can put the pieces together." But suffice to say that any response was not satisfactory. There is one thing, I don't know if you had read the article that I had sent you, but apparently they are looking into trying countries that were selling, that are or have been selling to Israel as being like part of the war crimes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So U.S.
We just gave them another $20 billion in weapons.
Yeah, it's all listed, like what all we gave them, tanks and all kinds of shit. And so they are looking, the countries that all agreed that Palestine is a state are looking to basically not like sue, but hold the countries that did continue to sell arms to Israel responsible for the deaths in Gaza, which is fantastic. I hope they do. This is from The Guardian. Democratic Party's 92-page platform lacks a call for arms embargo on Israel. The document focused on domestic objectives, such as growing the economy and combating inequality.
The U.S. Democratic Party on Sunday unveiled its platform for November's presidential race, but nowhere in the 92-page document does it mention an arms embargo on Israel, a key demand by uncommitted delegates at the party's 4-day convention in Chicago, and a central demand by Gaza war protesters gathering in the city. The platform, which was to be voted on Monday, instead described a wish list of domestic Democrat objectives, among them growing the economy, combating inequality, and the protection of reproductive rights. Reportedly, the document was finalized before Joe Biden stepped away from his White House re-election bid, and it contains both a focus on the achievements of the U.S. president's 4 years in the Oval Office and the now discarded plans for a second term, including healing the soul of America. Whatever the fuck that meant. Meanwhile, Harris and the rest of the Democratic Party are convening as U.S. diplomats scour the Middle East for an elusive ceasefire in Gaza, where Israel has been waging war in retaliation for Hamas's October 7th attack. The issue of a ceasefire, which has divided moderate and progressive members of the party, was not formally discussed in committee hearings when the document was being drafted, according to the Washington Post. The platform makes a strong statement about the historic work that President Biden and Vice President Harris have accomplished hand in hand, and offers a vision for a progressive agenda that we can build on as a nation and as a party as we head into the next 4 years, the Democratic National Committee said in a press release. Gaza protests in Chicago are planned by more than 200 groups, with organizers expecting tens of thousands to join. On Sunday, the city received a possibly early taste of what some fear would be a repeat of the 1968 convention in Chicago that was characterized by a police riot targeting anti-Vietnam protesters. A rally against the Israel-Hamas war and restrictions on reproductive rights was met by a larger showing of Chicago police when it set off down the city's Michigan Avenue. A far larger protest focusing exclusively on U.S. support for Israel is set to begin at noon on Monday at Union Park. Organizers of Sunday's protest steered marchers to the General John Logan Monument in Grant Park, which was also a focal point for protesters in 1968 and featured in photos of the riots. According to the Chicago Sun-Times, Gaza protesters who have promised to deliver a week of justice attempted to disturb a delegate party. An organizer identified by the outlet as Janan said protesters were committed to confronting the party over the war. Welcome to Hell Week, Janan added, another grabbing a microphone at the event to accuse the party of funding a genocide. Nadine Neighbor, an activist with the UIC Arab American Cultural Center, said Democratic politicians were hiding behind women and LGBTQ plus rights as a cover for support of Israel. We are here to fight for our bodies and our hearts, she told the Sun-Times. Any movement guided by radical collective love is like fire. It's inextinguishable. So free Palestine and free them all. So free Palestine and free them all. The combative mood is unlikely to be soothed by the absence of the arms issue from the Democrats' manifesto pledges. Instead, the party calls on members to recommit to support for Israel in the fight against Hamas. It also calls for support for a two-state solution that upholds the right of Palestinians to live in freedom and security in a viable state of their own, that many anti-war protesters view as a fig leaf for continued U.S. military aid toward a goal that has shown scant signs of being achieved. But the document does call for an immediate and lasting ceasefire deal that secures the release of all hostages taken by Hamas fighters in the cross-border October 7th raid, as well as aims to protect against the additional displacement and death of thousands. The four-day convention kicks off on Monday night with Biden and the 2016 Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton delivering speeches. Former presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton are expected to speak on Tuesday and Wednesday, respectively. Barack apparently made some dick jokes about Trump. He's always worried about his crowd size.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Harris's running mate and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz also takes the stage on Wednesday to accept the vice presidential nomination, and Harris will take the spotlight on Thursday. Yeah, the Democratic Party needs to do something. Needs to not support genocide in Israel, right?
I mean, not support genocide, period, would be logical.
Yeah.
Especially not like,
oh my gosh, you're committing genocide? Would you like to buy these weapons?
They're not taking the uncommitted movement seriously enough. I think they can win Michigan 100,000 less votes than they did in 2020. This is from CARE International. Birth under bombs, 9 months of hell.
9 months on from the escalation of violence in Gaza, women there are now 3 times more likely to miscarry and 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. Imagine being pregnant and knowing you're 3 times more likely to miscarry. Imagine being pregnant and knowing you're 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. Imagine being pregnant, experiencing the fear of death every single day. Imagine being pregnant and feeling like the world has completely forgotten you. This is the hell pregnant women in Gaza are living through every day. In the 9 months or 40 weeks that the violence in Gaza has now raged on, instead of spending 9 months safely and hopefully preparing for the birth of their baby, These women have spent the entirety of the pregnancy in constant fear. And remind you, high stress levels also cause you to miscarry and can also cause conditions like preeclampsia, which would make you die in childbirth because you can't be on bed rest for like 4 to 6 weeks. 22-year-old Diana discovered she was pregnant shortly after violence escalated last October and gave birth to her son, Yemen, under intense bombing and gunfire late last week. I had a difficult labor. I was so frightened as the bombing was intense and didn't stop even for a minute. My mother was so afraid for me and the baby. She prayed and prayed that we'd still be alive by dawn. I gave birth to my son, Yemen, at about 2 a.m. There was no special care for the baby when he was born, and he was not fully examined. He has jaundice now, which has affected his brain. Diana is not alone. Over 50,000 women are currently pregnant in Gaza. Around 180 are due to give birth today, but not all of them will make it that far. Pregnant women in Gaza have experienced so much trauma since October that they are 3 times more likely to miscarry than they were before. For those who defy the odds and manage to carry their pregnancy to full term, the likelihood is that they will be forced to give birth in a tent, a temporary shelter, or even in the streets amid the rubble. They will do this without painkillers, while bombs continue to drop around them, knowing that they are now 3 times more likely to die giving birth. Expressing concern on forgetting women and their experiences in this conflict, Haiba al-Hajazi, CARE's regional advocacy advisor for the MENA region, says it's abhorrent that women and their experiences in this conflict have largely been forgotten. The international community has to step up and put them front and center. We need a gendered response to this conflict, one that prioritizes the needs and experiences of women and funds the women leading their communities through crisis. We urgently need governments to use their diplomatic powers and bring an end to the conflict that is destroying lives, many that have only just begun. This is from ABC News. As a father was registering his twins' birth in Gaza, an airstrike killed the 3-day-olds and their mothers at home. The Israeli military said the incident was not currently known to the IDF.
And then once it is known, they will put it under investigation because that is not how the IDF conducts itself, and they don't blah 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 blah.
So the IDF pussies.
Yeah, it's a constant thing. Like, at least, switch it up a little bit.
Oh my god, it's not that hard. Instead, they're just like, what? What? We didn't do that.
We don't approve of that.
When we left his home on Tuesday morning to get birth certificates for his newborn twins, Mohammed Abu al-Qassam never imagined he would return with their death certificates instead. In a matter of minutes, an Israeli strike on the tower building in Deir al-Balah, where Abu al-Qassam family was living under, having been displaced from the north of Gaza, killed his 3-day-old twins, Acer and Isel, together with their mother, Arfa, and grandmother, according to family members. The twins were born on Saturday, August 10th, as written on their birth certificate. On that day, Dr. Arfa shared the news in a Facebook post with friends, welcoming her babies in war-torn Gaza and praying for their health and safety. Now, the few comments to congratulate their birth below the announcement are overshadowed by hundreds of condolences to the family. I helped her raise funds for her to deliver the twins safely. I only spoke with her yesterday. My heart is truly broken, a friend wrote. The Israeli Defense Forces, in a statement to ABC News, said the details of the incident, as published, are not currently known to the IDF. The military added the IDF is fighting against the murderous terrorist organization Hamas in Gaza following the massacre on October 7th. Unlike the terrorist organization Hamas, the IDF targets only military objectives and employs various measures to minimize harm to civilians. Okay, like 90% of the casualties since October 7th have been on the Palestinian side. They target civilians, obviously. They just...
No. You see what happened is they wrapped the babies, the newborn twins, up in like a really tight swaddle, and then they shoved some of the, who are they always after? They shoved some Hamas down in there to hide, inside the baby's blanket. So they had to kill them because, Hamas was underneath the babies inside their blanket. So they had to kill the babies. He had a gun.
The babies were Hamas.
Yep. Actually, I think killing the babies may have radicalized people further to Hamas. So, good job.
No, okay. That's just... reading that every week is just... Abu learned about the news from his brother-in-law, Farah Arafa, who told ABC News that he survived the explosion because he was out to buy bread. I went to register the children the day before. They said to come back tomorrow, so I went, and I was waiting when someone called me telling me that the apartment in which I lived was bombed, Abu told ABC News. As soon as he got the call, he said he rushed to the nearby Al-Qasa hospital where he was told the babies and mother had been taken. Shock and pain overtook him when he saw with his own eyes that the news was true, he said. Videos show him collapsing and shaking, unable to contain his desperation. The couple married in July last year and moved in Gaza City, where she worked as a pharmacist and he worked as a sales representative until October 13th, 2023, when they were forced to evacuate to southern Gaza. At Al-Qasa Hospital, Arafa grieved. He held his brother-in-law and worried about the future of his remaining family. Arafa told ABC News he was living in the same apartment as his mother, sister, her husband, and their babies. The apartment that was filled with joy and happiness since the twins came into this life, he said. Now a massive hole in the building is a reminder of the deadly attack that put an end to the happiness. It also punctuated the difficulties endured by Abu Al-Qasim and his family in the last 10 months of war in Gaza. The displacement, the lack of resources, and the pregnancy carried on during what international humanitarian organizations and the United Nations called a collapsed health system. Minutes before the explosion, I was outside the house. My mother phoned me and told me that she wanted bread. Arafa told ABC News about the morning the tower apartment was hit. Minutes after I ended my call with her, a friend called me and told me that they had all been killed. Arafa said he was overcome by shock. What is the reason? I still can't believe it. A few minutes ago, I was talking to my mother on the phone. He said, we are civilians, and we are looking for our livelihood to provide for our daily needs. We have no connection to organizations, parties, or the military. I do not know why we are bombed. What happened? What began as a simple task of securing birth certificates transformed into a heart-wrenching journey to bury his family and obtain their death certificates. But Muhammad's sorrow is not unique. According to a spokesperson for the Hamas-run Ministry of Health, who told ABC News, this is part of a larger tragedy affecting countless families. This attack wiped out the entire family from the civil registry, raising the number of newborn deaths to 115 children since the beginning of this conflict, Dr. Khalil, spokesperson for the Ministry of Health, told ABC News. The psychological and emotional impact on the father of the two children who were killed is profound. We have approximately 10,000 parents suffering from psychological disorders, most of whom are left untreated and are seen wandering the streets. As the measures and protections for infants and newborns, Al-Quran said the attacks are directed at every citizen of the Gaza Strip, making it impossible to protect children, and that the lack of aid and resources is affecting the youngest disproportionately. Thousands of children have been killed in this brutal conflict over the course of just 10 months. When the authorities closed the border crossings and deprived the infants, newborns, and baby formula, the situation became even more dire. Tragically, a significant number of newborns have lost their lives due to malnutrition, too, he said. These appalling atrocities have become tragically commonplace as relentless, indiscriminate assaults continue to claim the lives of so many children and leave countless families devastated. Surely, it must be stopped, a spokesperson for the United Nations, Joan Fan, said in a statement to ABC News.
Like, just imagine that for just a second, that, like, you went to DG to, like, get some milk or whatever, and I called you and I was like, oh, hey, we need some chocolate syrup too. And you're like, all right. And then like 2 seconds later, your brother calls you and he's like, dude, your house just blew up.
I would try to punish those
Nobody made it out.
responsible. Yeah, I'd try to punish those who are responsible.
Especially if you had a psychological break, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what they're doing to them. They are literally creating their own enemy. Literally creating Hamas members.
Hamas!
I know. Gotta have something stuck in your throat. Like a dick.
Israel is a genocidal bully.
All right.
Free Palestine. This is from Sky News. 2 astronauts are stuck in space. How will they pass the time and survive until 2025? The 2 astronauts were only meant to be in space for 8 days, but now they might not return till 2025. Do they have enough supplies for such a stint? How are they coping mentally, and what is the day-to-day life like up there?
It's the plot of plenty of sci-fi films. 2 astronauts are stranded in space and don't yet know how they're going to get back. Sonny Williams and Commander Barry Butch Wilmore arrived at the International Space Station in June as the first crew to test Boeing's new Starliner, which suffered helium leaks and thruster failures before it docked, raising questions over how safe it is for the return flight. Boeing has insisted the astronauts are not stuck and said there's no increased risk in bringing them back in the Starliner. But NASA is contemplating getting them back on a SpaceX flight instead. They should have only been in space for 8 days, but they've now been there for more than 2 months and may have to stay until February of 2025. But do they have enough supplies for such a stint? How are they coping mentally, and what is the day-to-day life at the International Space Station? The ISS is 356 feet end to end, 1 yard shy of the full length of an American football field, including the end zones. The living and workspace, NASA says, is larger than a 6-bedroom house and has 6 sleeping quarters, 2 bathrooms, a gym, and a 360-degree view bay window. As you'll see later, it's not quite as luxurious as it sounds. Miss Williams and Mr. Wilmore aren't alone. They're sharing the facilities with 7 other astronauts from other missions, 4 of them fellow Americans and 3 of them Russians. There are reserve supplies up there to keep astronauts going for plenty of time. The space station has its own oxygen generating system, and about 50% of oxygen exhaled from carbon dioxide is recovered. As for water, the station has a urine into drinking water recycling system, and a part of that system also captures moisture released into the cabin air from the crew's breath and sweat. Food supplies are a bit fancier. Meals are created at NASA's Space Food Systems Laboratory in Houston, where chefs focus on making food appetizing as well as nutritious. Much of it is dehydrated, meaning it has to be filled up with water before being consumed, while some is ready-made and just need to be heated. There's meat. Barbecue beef brisket is one example of a meal on offer. Eggs, vegetables, bread, savory snacks, and sweet treats in this station's kitchen. But how do you use a toilet in zero gravity? The spacecraft regularly receives more supplies from Earth, with the last one arriving on August 6th. Launched on a rocket from Kazakhstan on May 30th, the supplies included about 3 tons of food, fuel, and other supplies for Miss Williams, Mr. Wilmore, and 7 other crew members on board. The crew can essentially place their orders for what they want to come on these crafts by speaking to Mission Control ahead of launches. That was good news for Mr. Wilmore and Miss Williams, who were forced to ditch their personal suitcases before taking off in June to make room for extra equipment, meaning they've had to wear spare clothes that were already at the ISS upon arrival. The difference is there are 2 separate tubes to go in, one for urine and one for poo. The urine one, which is colored yellow, is attached to the wall and almost looks like a vacuum cleaner, and fittingly, it has a suction function to prevent gravity from causing a mess. The tube for poo looks like more of a typical toilet, with a seat too, though you have to hold onto a handle on the wall next to it to avoid floating away as you go. On the bright side, there's about half a dozen types of toilet paper stuffed into bags on the toilet walls, including wet wipes and disinfectant wipes in case things don't go correctly, as Miss Williams put it. Astronauts are also each given toiletry kits that come with things like a toothbrush and toothpaste, which you have to either swallow or spit into a tissue, and a hairbrush, which Miss Williams says is pointless in space because gravity constantly keeps your hair upright. Remarkably, you can sleep on the floor, on the wall, or on the ceiling. That's because without gravity, the crew never feel like they're lying down. It makes no difference whether they are on the floor, standing up, or upside down. It all feels the same. that's you know what? I would be in trouble because I'd be like, you know what? Night-night.
I would never sleep.
I would always sleep.
I would go crazy on the ISS.
They strap you down to the wall so you can sleep.
Yeah.
So the ISS has sleeping stations about the size of phone booths that the crew get into, which consist of a sleeping bag and a pillow on the floor, wall, and ceiling. They're both retired Navy captains and longtime NASA astronauts who already have long space station missions behind them. Mr. Wilmore, 61, and Miss Williams, 58, said going into this test flight that they expected to learn a lot about Starliner and how it operates. At their only news conference from space in July, they assured reporters they were keeping busy, helping with repairs and research, and expressed confidence in all the Starliner testing going on behind the scenes. There are tests going on back on Earth to determine whether the Boeing craft can still be used safely to bring them back. That mantra you've heard, failure is not an option, that's why we are staying here now, Mr. Williams said last month. We trust that the tests that we are doing are the ones we need to do to get the right answers to give us the data that we need to come back. There's been no public word from them yet on the prospects of an 8-month stay. As it stands, all but one of the Starliner's 5 failed thrusters have been reactivated in orbit. Ouch. Tests are currently being done on Earth to try to remedy the problems seen in space, but engineers aren't sure exactly what's causing them, and are also trying to plug helium leaks in Starliner's propulsion system, which is crucial for maneuvering. That kind of backs up where I was saying like they should have their own people that build their spacecrafts, because then they would have an engineer who created it on hand, who knew exactly what was wrong and how to fix it, or there wouldn't be a problem in the first place.
Everything being uniform would probably be good.
Yeah. Boeing has reiterated its capsule could still safely bring the astronauts home, but the company will need to modify Starliner's software in case it has to return without a crew. Yeah, because they didn't get the Starliner to space with an unmanned crew for the longest time because they were doing shit with the software and it kept messing up. I'd be like, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Ken Bowersox, NASA's Space Operations Mission Chief, has suggested coming home on the same aircraft is still an option. Mr. Bowersox said during a recent meeting they heard from a lot of folks that had concerns and the decision was not clear. The SpaceX flight they would get on instead would leave Earth in September, but 2 astronauts scheduled to be on it would have to stay home to make room for Miss Williams and Mr. Wilmore. Why are we sending more people up in the first place when we already have people stuck? That doesn't make sense to me. Why would you send more people up there when you can't even bring your people back home?
The more the merrier.
Did they decide that how they're going to bring the ISS down to take it apart now is just fill it full of people and hope that gravity just brings it down? Like, is that what's going on now? Like, I don't understand. Why the fuck would you send more people? A decision is expected in the next week or so. Russian Valery Polyakov set that record in the mid-1990s, spending 437 days off Earth. Last year, NASA astronaut Frank Rubio came back from a 371-day trip. That trip, much like this one, was prolonged by technical difficulties and was only meant to take 6 months, obviously. And then you give Boeing more money to create more flying crafts.
We just gave them another $2 billion contract.
Like, here's $2 billion. You can't bring our people home. Your planes keep failing and people are dying, but we want you to make planes for us.
You refuse to do safety inspections.
Or you bribe people.
We kill people.
Or kill them, yes.
Or just kill them. Yeah, I don't. Failing upwards. That's what the incentive is.
It's just.
And what about the astronauts? They're scared. You know they're scared. They gotta put on the face or whatever when the cameras are on, but when they're off, they're like, fucking Boeing.
Well, not just that, but like it was supposed to be just a little 8-day trip. You know, now they're going to miss, like I said before, who knows how many birthdays or anniversaries between now and then. They're going to miss Thanksgiving with their family, Halloween with their family, Christmas with their family, New Year's with their family. They're going to miss all these things. They were only supposed to be there 8 days, and now they're going to lose a lot of their life back on Earth. You know what I mean?
Because Boeing was
ridiculous.
Incompetent.
It wouldn't surprise me if the other thrusters just never worked in the first place.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just...
yeah. It's frustrating.
It's very frustrating, and I feel very bad for
I need a $2 billion contract. I felt a lot of things, guys.
For a project that you'll claim will be ready in 2028, but when 2028 comes, we all fucking know they're going to be having technical difficulties at that time and needing an extension because they wouldn't have even fucking started on it.
Yeah.
I hope they go bankrupt first. I hope they go bankrupt. Oh, they're going to bail them out. What am I talking about? Yeah. Boeing, don't tell us.
This is a story we covered a couple months ago. Some important details and updates. This is from The Independent. Sandra Hemi to be finally freed from prison after spending 43 years in jail for a murder she didn't commit. The 64-year-old Missouri woman's conviction was overturned last month, but has since gone through a legal rigmarole, preventing her from being released.
Wait, seriously? They're still not...
She's still holding. She's still being held. They just forget us wherever they need to, I guess.
I'm wondering if they're going to put her in a mental institution.
Oh, you know it. Probably.
It's probably going to be it.
One prison to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. This doesn't make sense.
She didn't do anything wrong. She's just a little weird.
Missouri woman Sandra Hemme has been serving time for 4 decades after being wrongfully accused of a 1980 murder. Now, a court has cleared a path for her freedom. The 64-year-old's dealings with the criminal justice system has been turbulent. Aside from being considered the longest known wrongfully incarcerated woman in the U.S., in recent weeks her situation became more complicated. A circuit court judge in Missouri overturned her conviction on June 14th, ordering her to be retired or released from prison within 30 days. The judge wrote, "No evidence whatsoever outside of Miss Hemme's unreliable statements connects her to the crime." But weeks later, the Missouri Attorney General blocked her release after a lawyer from his office intervened, calling the prison to consider whether two unrelated sentences amounting to 12 years in prison should keep her behind bars according to July 10th court filing. Wait, what? She's been in there for how?
43 years.
So what is a 12-year sentence? That would be served time.
I think that's what I have to find out, maybe.
Okay, sorry. I was trying to read it over and over. But weeks later, a Missouri Attorney General blocked her release after a lawyer from his office intervened, calling the prison to consider whether two unrelated sentences amounting to 12 years in prison should keep her behind bars, according to a July 10th court filing. The Missouri Supreme Court on Thursday sided with the lower court's ruling, signaling that Hemme now appears to be able to go free. It's not immediately clear when she would be released. The Independent has emailed a lawyer for Hemme. The lower court judge noted that evidence directly ties a former police officer, Michael Holman, to the brutal murder of 31-year-old library worker Patricia Jeschke on November 13, 1980. Holman died in 2015. Patricia's slaying was grisly. After she didn't show up for work, her mother climbed into her apartment through a window to find her daughter's naked body and a pool of blood on the floor, her limbs bound with a telephone cord and a knife under her head and a pair of pantyhose wrapped around her throat. An investigation began their search for the killer. Hemme reemerged in the area, having just been discharged from a psychiatric hospital where she had spent most of her life after age 12, just 1 day before Patricia's body was found. Authorities found this timing suspicious. You mean the crooked cop thought this was perfect?
Mm-hmm.
Police took Hemme in for questioning, noting that she seemed mentally confused. After Hemme accused a man of being the murderer, who could not have been since he was in an alcohol treatment center at the time of Patricia's death, she pleaded guilty in exchange for removing the possibility of the death penalty. Authorities searched Holman's house after he died in 2015. They found gold horseshoe-shaped earrings in a closet, which Patricia's father said he had given his daughter. She is the victim of a manifest injustice, the circuit judge wrote in June. There was also underwear found in Holman's house as well. And Holman is the cop that brought Hemme in, and she had a knife too, which was the one that was actually used in the stabbing instead of the one that was underneath Patricia's head, which he also tried to say that Patricia committed suicide. There was that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he said that Patricia committed suicide. When that didn't fly, he blamed it on somebody with a mental health disorder, which, let's face it, whether you are at full mental health strength or not, cops or anyone who interrogate you under bright lights with lack of food, water, or sleep under a high-stress moment can convince you that you did something that you didn't do, that you committed a crime you did not commit. Now, it's going to be easier with somebody who does have a confusion, who is confused, who's mentally has an issue and is confused. It's going to be easier to convince them of something because they already don't trust their own mind. So when their own mind is telling them, no, I didn't do that, but a cop is telling them, yes, you did. Oh, shit, maybe I did. Maybe I did do that. Maybe I did. And there actually is case studies that do prove that that is factual. There are case studies that have shown that you can convince somebody of committing a crime that they never committed just by over and over and over telling them that they committed it. It is definitely possible. So, he found somebody with schizophrenia that was recently released from a hospital, handed her a knife, and told her that she fucking did it. It wouldn't be that hard. It wouldn't be that hard.
Mm-hmm.
But he's the one that had Patricia's panties and earrings. But they still want to say that he had nothing to do with it.
ACAB.
It just. Also, Holman was convicted of several other crimes before he died as well. So he was definitely a crooked ass cop.
This is from the Council of Europe, Commissioner for Human Rights. Human rights of trans people, increased visibility and legal recognition, contrast with lived experience of discrimination and violence.
The only thing I'm going to say about this before I start reading is it's 2024. Stay the fuck out of people's business and let them do what they want. I don't know why I'd have to say that.
Focus on what's in your pants.
Focus on what's going on in your life, not someone else's. It's none of your fucking business what they're doing. What, are we going to start doing like TSA pat downs to start making sure you're not tucking? Like what kind of, I just don't understand why some of these things are still an issue.
Because conservatives make it an issue.
Yeah, but like, okay, like why is bombing Gaza still an issue?
Because nobody's holding it. Now he needs to fuck it up, cut it out.
And why is abortion still an issue?
Democrats.
It's 2024. How are these still fucking
We're still fighting
issues?
over the same shit because they don't want to talk about real economics.
Mm-hmm. Valid. Realizing the rights of trans people is a matter of applying human rights equally to everyone, and states have the primary responsibility to lift the barriers trans people are facing in exercising their human rights, said today the Council of Europe Commissioner for Human Rights, while releasing a report entitled Human Rights and Gender Identity and Expression. The report takes stock of progress, as well as long-standing and new challenges experienced by trans people, including those who are further marginalized due to their characteristics or status, recognizing that trans people are a diverse group of individuals with differing experiences, identities, and views. It covers a range of issues such as non-discrimination, violence, family law, healthcare, legal gender recognition, asylum, employment, conversion practices, education, poverty, and housing. It also addresses matters that have recently become a flashpoint for hostile public debate, such as access to gender-segregated spaces and categories in various settings, such as sport, sanitation, and detention, and the related framing of trans people's rights as a fundamental threat to women's rights.
It's a tale as old as time.
I mean,
it's just because they get rights doesn't mean you get yours taken away. You can both have rights.
I don't care if it doesn't look. If you give trans people's rights, I'm not going to be like, what about me? They're advocating for just rights to exist. So
Yeah.
no, I don't feel threatened by them receiving rights.
They just want to live their lives with some degree of dignity.
It's a threat to women's rights. Like how?
Birthing person bonus whole haver.
I mean, there's trans people that get pregnant too that don't fully transition. You know.
Yeah.
So what? I think that they should have rights to have a baby or have an abortion as well. I mean, is that a threat to women's rights? I don't understand.
I don't understand that maybe women are losing their identity because someone else is taking with them.
Is it because trans people do like better makeup than we do sometimes? Yeah, I don't. It's so silly. This must be J.K. Rowling's thing. All the trans people are gonna keep
That's
ovaries.
exactly what it is. It's just like they put women on such a pedestal that they just think everything else is like trivial. I don't get it. You're so feminist that you're just like, you're not a woman. I don't know.
Yeah, that doesn't make
I don't
sense.
understand.
Instead of being like, hey, join us, become one of us. Join us. You know what I mean? Instead of just being like, oh look, we have gained another female. Well, I look at it like, you're not real. Why?
I don't know.
There's too much going on in the world to like have this much focus and hate on what's in somebody's pants. Like I really think that a lot of these people just got tricked. And I think that's it. Or they just really, really, really wish they could be trans. But won't admit it. Because they were raised that it was bad. And so they just like carry on that hate for the rest of their life without understanding why they have it in the first place.
It's like the homophobe.
It further addresses the rights and interests of trans children and youth in various settings, the recognition and protection of non-binary people, and interconnections with gender expression, the greater visibility and awareness of trans people at all levels of society, and the significant progress made in providing better legal protection and recognition of human rights of trans people across Europe, contrast with the shockingly high rates of discrimination, violence, and insecurity trans people experience in their daily lives, underlines the commissioner. The report comes in the context of a current backsliding in respect of human rights, where marginalized groups are increasingly instrumentalized for political gain, and where well-organized and well-funded anti-gender movements are gaining traction. Anti-gender and anti-rights narratives ultimately undermine the rights of everyone, but their focus on so-called traditional norms around sex, gender, and expression is particularly destructive of the rights of trans people, said the commissioner. Within the framework, the commissioner sets out 15 recommendations for states to achieve real positive change in the lives of trans people and ensure that they enjoy their human rights on an equal footing with everyone else. A central paragraph is affirming trans people's human dignity, physical and psychological integrity, and personal autonomy. In this regard, among others, the commissioner recommends providing access to legal gender recognition based on self-determination for trans people who want it. In addition, trans people should have access to trans-specific health care without a mental health diagnosis and without discrimination. I do want to say that, like, I do know that whenever you are transitioning, one of the things that they put down in order for you to receive the hormones is mental health. The code is gender dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
So gender confusion is what they put down. It's a mental health problem. That's what they put down.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not really a mental health problem.
No.
It's not really a mental health problem. It's just like, I feel better this way. I feel more like a person when I'm like this. I feel more like myself when I'm like this. I feel, it's not a matter of that. So weird. Okay, sorry. The commissioner also calls on member states to respect trans children's human rights, including by ensuring that their views are given due weight in accordance with age and maturity and pursuing their best interests. In addition, the commissioner shows that alleged conflicts of rights are often not born out of reality and are mostly premised on harmful prejudices about trans people. There is no such thing as granting special rights, and realizing the human rights of trans people does not undermine the rights of others. Human rights are universal. They apply equally to everyone, emphasizes the commissioner. This is from Vanity Fair. In states where Republicans banned abortion, with no exception for rape led to 58,979 pregnancies post-Roe. This is a dystopian world conservatives have wrought. And I bet you none of them are going to adopt any of those kids. You're going to force them to have them. You're not going to let them take care of them. Or they're not going to want to take care of them, and they're going to put them into the system where they're going to end up turning into criminals because the system fails. So good job, conservatives.
In September 2021, Texas Governor Greg Abbott boldly claimed that his state's barbaric abortion law, which banned the procedure after 6 weeks of pregnancy with no exceptions for incest or rape, was not actually as bad as it sounded because he was going to eliminate rape.
Are you fucking serious?
Rape is a crime, and Texas will work tirelessly to make sure that we eliminate all rapists from the streets of Texas by aggressively going out and arresting them and prosecuting them and getting them off the streets, Abbott said, in all seriousness.
Dude, Abbott, I hope you fucking choke.
Dude has no idea what he's fucking talking
I hope
about.
he chokes to death. Oh, we're going to make this illegal, so it's not going to happen. You know that most rapes actually don't get reported because the cops usually don't believe them. Not to mention that you have a very short time frame to get a rape kit together to be able to get evidence and DNA of who actually did it. So you make people afraid to even report a crime, but you're going to claim that you're going to end it? Like, are you fucking stupid?
Excuse me. Hold on. If it was already a law, it was illegal already. It was already illegal. And it's happening. So you're not going to eliminate it. Obviously. Okay. Not surprisingly, Abbott did not eliminate rape. But 9 months after his absurd attempt to explain why it was perfectly reasonable to force sexual assault victims in his state to carry their pregnancies to term, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and a whole bunch of other states also banned abortion without exceptions. And guess what? Rape and rape that resulted in pregnancy kept happening in those places too. Just how many people have been raped and impregnated in states where, thanks to politicians like Abbott, the law prohibits them from terminating the pregnancy? According to a study published in JAMA Internal Medicine, an absolute staggering number. In the 14 states that implemented total abortion bans following the Dobbs decision, we estimate that 519,981 completed rapes were associated with 64,565 pregnancies during the 4 to 18 months that the bans were in effect. Of these, an estimated 5,586 rape-related pregnancies occurred in states with rape exceptions, and 58,979 in states with no exception, with 26,313 in Texas. The study, which was led by the medical director at Planned Parenthood of Montana, also revealed that 10 or fewer legal abortions occurred monthly in each of the total abortion ban states, which indicates that persons who have been raped and become pregnant cannot access legal abortions in their home state, even in states with rape exceptions, which of course is exactly what the politicians who championed, voted for, and signed these abortion bans wanted. As JAMA's editors write in a note about the study, whether these survivors of rape had illegal abortions, received medication abortion through the mail, or traveled to other states, or carried the child to birth is unknown.
Because people don't report it. Because they're afraid to.
This is going to be the main issue that loses a lot of Republicans their seats this year.
It's disgusting.
You're basically giving the whole thing to the Democrats, and now Democrats don't have to promise shit. I mean, they have,
Is that
but they
why?
don't have to do jack shit because Republicans are so shit.
Is that why there's a thing going around about if she's old enough to bleed, she's old enough to breed? Is that why that's been going around? Kids start bleeding between age 8 and 14, 53% by age 12. Is that why that's going around? Because you're going to force them to have babies? You're going to force babies to have babies?
It's the red states that fight for kids to be able to marry, for kids to be able to fucking work, for kids to get raped. I mean, it's all the age of consent laws. It's all fucking red states.
Fucking pedophiles. You're
Yeah.
pedophiles.
I
don't care if you marry them or not. You're a fucking pedophile.
It's like your choice is: do you want a fucking like pedophile who's not going to let you have abortions, or do you want someone who's just not going to do a damn thing and not change a damn thing, even if Republicans make it worse, they don't change it back. So like, I hate the duopoly.
I don't understand why we made these laws for a reason. Why are you backtracking? Why are you taking a step back? They were implemented in time for a reason. There's a reason child labor laws exist, because children should be children. They shouldn't be having to go find jobs. Now, I understand to a degree there are situations, lower income families, where a younger child, let's say age 13, 14, able to work. That work should consist of bare minimum things. Sweeping the floors, maybe taking out the trash, organizing. Very simple. But children, there's a reason children are not supposed to fucking work.
Mm-hmm. Children and elderly can work.
That's the reason that a lot of children, or I should say that's the reason a lot of the adults have black lung, because as children, they were working in mines. The youngest pregnancy to ever be carried to term was done by a 5-year-old. And how much more of that are we going to see? How many children are we going to see forced to have babies? It's so fucking disgusting.
That's because white old dudes have no fucking clue what they're talking about.
Yeah, these are the same people that were like,
oh, ectopic pregnancy, just put the baby in the woman's record.
It's implanted in the womb.
it's already dead, yo. Why is it still growing? Because it's still receiving the proteins, and that's just what it does. But the baby's not viable.
Yeah, it sucks. I know this week's news was pretty
Disgusting.
bad. Worse than usual.
The only-
Even though we've been talking about torture for the last 2 weeks, this is somehow just as bad.
Because it shows how much we just keep backsliding. I mean, the only good thing I've seen on here so far was about Hemi, and she's not even getting out.
She's not even they're trying to keep her in for 12 more years.
And that was the only good news that that was there. So it's just like, fuck.
Yeah, it's crazy.
This is from the communistparty.org. 100 years later, what did Lenin give to the world?
Lenin walks around the world. The sun sets like a scar. Between the darkness and the dawn, there rises a red star. The world is a better place because of Vladimir Lenin. An outstanding 20th century working class leader and revolutionary, he helped change history. The revolution in St. Petersburg, which Lenin helped lead in 1917, opened the door to a new era. The impulse first set in motion by the October Revolution lives on, even 100 years after his death. The world revolutionary process continues to unfold a century later, at times by fits and starts, at others almost standing still, then explosively, rapidly, with all the force of a social hurricane. This remains the epoch of the revolutionary transition from capitalism to socialism. Setbacks, contractions, and reversals notwithstanding, as Lenin himself once observed, the socialist revolution is not a single act, but a series of acts over an entire historical period. Without October, the very concept of working class rule, the idea that ordinary workers are enough, that they possess everything needed to create a new just world, would remain a distant dream. Without October, Asia might never have awakened, the chains of colonial rule binding Africa might never have been broken, and Europe might still lay claim to all of Latin America as its special province. Yes, the stirrings of anti-colonial, anti-racist, anti-imperialist struggle were set in motion, not necessarily casually, but deliberately, willfully, across an oppressed and anguished planet. The reverberations were no less felt in the coalfields, steel towns, and garment sweatshops of these United States. African American soldiers leaving the battlefields of World War I and fleeing the lynch mobs of Made in America reaction and Poles, Russians, Irish, Italians, and Jews pouring through the gates of Ellis Island all heard the resounding crash when the walls of the Winter Palace came tumbling down in Petrograd. It was then a self-described socialist of the path became, according to Paul Robeson, an advocate of socialism as a way of life. W.E.B. Du Bois, who later became Robeson's close friend, declared after visiting Soviet Russia, "I may have been partially misled and misinformed, but if what I have seen is Bolshevism, I am a Bolshevik." More than any other figure, Lenin helped birth the modern communist movement. The young Lenin early on grasped the scientific socialism developed by Engels and Marx, which he saw as a way to understand and change the world. A defender of the Marxist worldview, Lenin managed to creatively add to and develop the communist outlook. Already his two tactics, in embryonic form, stressed what came to be known as the United Front concept, the absolute necessity of a broad front led by the working class to defeat reaction. Here, Lenin resolutely challenged the left posturing of those Marxists who had feared an alliance with capitalists against a greater enemy, arguing again and again that the working class must lead the battle for democracy. Addressing the unique circumstances of the revolutionary working class movement in Russia, his "What is to be done" advanced the concept of a new type of political party, worker-led and directed, waging a many-sided struggle for dominance in the areas of ideas, politics, and class struggle. Following Marx and Engels' thesis on the independent and leading role of the working class, Lenin's concept was a new thing, a party led politically and ideologically by workers that would lead the whole of society to a new form of civilization. In What is to be Done, Lenin stresses, insists, on the party's advocacy of socialism while fighting for reforms, arguing that without that, all struggles, trade union or no, would result in reforms alone. The achievement of socialism required, in his estimation, an extra element or ingredient, a Marxist plus. But his concept of the party was not a thing frozen in time. The cadre concept, advanced for uniquely Russian circumstances, was later replaced by the mass party that would seek working class majority support for its aims. Marxism, for Lenin, was a living doctrine whose various sides modulate and shift according to the conditions of the working class struggle. With now one, then another side coming to the fore, he took issue at once with one-sided, narrow, and sectarian approaches, while also castigating those who would turn Marx into an ordinary liberal with the claim that socialist goal was utter utopianism. Understanding that Marxism as a scientific outlook was by its very nature partisan, capable of conception only polemically, Lenin's theoretical contributions were always couched in its defense. He glanced with suspicion, if not contempt, at those who sought to develop Marx with long discredited flexible concepts in new clothing. At the same time, fearful of dogmatism and being a student of science, he read and studied voraciously, testing his materialist outlook against new discoveries, discarding what proved wrong and incorporating the new. Lenin was not wedded to any particular form of struggle. Everything depended on a concrete analysis of a concrete situation. In the summer of 1917, he wrestled over and over with the possibility of a peaceful transition to state power. The tumultuous July days, though, changed his mind, and August found him hiding in a barn, writing The State and Revolution. His Imperialism, written a year earlier, theorized a new stage of capitalism dominated by the big banks, and along with it the theory of the weakest link and the possibility of a breakaway from the capitalist world system. While tracing imperialism's economic contours characterized by the export of capital, his attention turned invariably to issues of democracy. Defining imperialism politically as reaction all down the line, he pointed to its financial production and trade cycles and their inevitable impacts, pulling people and nations together and forcing them apart over and over again, imposing both unity and separation, an objective process in which opposites are perpetually in motion. He asked provocatively, between the two which is primary, unity was his clear and unequivocal answer. Lenin wrote extensively on colonialism and championed the rights of oppressed nations and peoples to self-determination. National oppression was for him, at its very essence, an issue of democracy, the right of a people to determine their own destiny. The working class movement must put this issue front and center, he said. Whoever does not recognize and champion the equality of nations and languages, and does not fight against all national oppression or inequality, is not a Marxist, he said. Is not a Marxist. He is not even a Democrat.
He did.
In-
Sorry.
Indeed, the content of democracy was the central concern of Lenin, who viewed its destination as invariably shaped by the contours of the road traveled. He wrote, "All democracy consists in the proclamation and realization of the rights which under capitalism are realizable only to a very small degree and only relatively. But without the proclamation of these rights, without a struggle to induce them now, immediately, without training the masses in the spirit of the struggle, socialism is impossible." Needless to say, the founding of the new working class state and the elaboration of laws of transition from capitalism to socialism are among Lenin's most important, if not his signal contributions. The necessity of a working class leadership, the emergence of a new form of state power, the Soviets, the relationship between the party and the state, the content of the economy, all of this and more seized his attention. Here again, when confronted with the backwardness of the Russian economy, war communism, and the need to switch economic gears, Lenin held firm not to dogma, but to science, and proposed a new economic policy premised on working class power in government and state capitalism in the economy. The idea of peaceful coexistence between different social systems was his. Toward the end of his brief but eventful life, thinking through strategies for the newly founded communist parties was a major concern. Here, Lenin contended with political mistakes of both left and right. In the Communist International, stress was placed on the necessity of winning over the majority of the working class as opposed to attempts at seizing power by small disciplined minorities. It was in these debates that the United Front concept was placed before the communist parties as a strategic concept while rejecting notions like Trotsky's permanent revolution or Belakun's theory of offensive. On this topic, Lenin's left-wing communism remains the most relevant of texts. The life work of this Soviet communist leader, along with his successes and failures, will be studied for some time to come. Like any life, it was not without error. Chief among them may have been Lenin's polemic style, the impatient handling of differences, and the name-calling that infected the ideological and political struggle of the period. With respect to the United States, the posing of the African-American population as a nation was an error, as was the application of the labor aristocracy thesis as the sole explanation for the slow and hesitant growth of class and socialist consciousness, and underestimation of the influence of racism and what Du Bois termed the psychological wage of whiteness. But these issues, while important, pale somewhat in relation to the main challenge to Lenin's legacy, the idea following Plekhanov that the Russian Revolution was premature and incapable of holding its own. It's true that the leaders of the Russian Revolution themselves held definite trepidations regarding possible outcomes, hoping for a revolution in the West to come to the aid of the struggling young Soviet Republic. In fact, Lenin bet on it, but the uprising in Europe failed to materialize. Yet, despite this miscalculation, the revolution survived, albeit at tremendous cost. Still, for 74 years, the Soviet Union attempted a model of socialism that made many advances, providing invaluable lessons, and its collapse was not inevitable. Lending credence to this view are the experiences of Cuba, China, and Vietnam, nations that have found novel paths for pursuing the socialist goal premised on working class leadership of the state. They may not have arrived quite yet, but the quest is ongoing and is helping reshape the planet. The world today, in many respects, is quite different from the one Lenin departed almost a century ago. Climate change, global pandemics, changes in the very composition of the working class, growing right-wing power, artificial intelligence, social networks, and the 24-hour news streams all impact the very forms and conditions of the struggle. The struggle for democracy, always at the very center of Lenin's understanding of class struggle, has become even more acute. At stake here is the need to reject narrow concept of working class power, forced marches, administrative shortcuts, and short-sighted attempts to control information flows. The means of achieving, to say nothing, of shaping working class rule will inevitably determine its end. This includes models of leadership and insistence on collectivity and regular replenishing of collective bodies. If ever working class majorities needed to be won to the socialist cause, is it not today? Must not education, culture, debate, in other words, the battle of ideas, assume an equal place with all other forms of struggle? Should not a critique be made with the respect of the very choice of weapons, making the weapons of choice strikes, occupation, boycotts, mass campaigns, and yes, the ballot? Late-stage monopoly capitalism is indeed reaction all down the line, as borne out by the rise of global fascism, with all of its racism, sexism, and homophobia today spurred on, not so much by the need to crush the imminent rise of a socialist power, as by transnational capital's increasing inability to maintain the rate of profit and resolve in its internal contradictions. National hatreds, too, are prisons that hold people's minds captive but must be broken. This is as true as today as it was 100 years ago, and fighting for peace in Gaza, in Ukraine, in Yemen, and everywhere is just as urgent for now as it was for the Bolsheviks in the early years of the last century. The answer to it all is democracy, democracy, and more democracy.
Democracy now. Sorry.
But not just any democracy, class democracy, advanced democracy giving all power to the workers and the people. The dictatorship of the proletariat. I have to be.